Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Raiden lounged on the threadbare couch, flipping through channels on their ancient TV. He glanced over at his roommate and shook his head. You gonna be at that all night again? Alvin didn't look up from his work. This could be it, Ray. I'm close to a breakthrough. That's what you said last week, Raiden replied with a smirk. And the week before that, I mean it this time. Alvin carefully added a drop of clear liquid to a vial, watching intently as it turned a vibrant shade of purple. This compound could revolutionize the field of psychopharmacology. Raiden muted the TV and sat up, suddenly interested. What exactly are you cooking up over there? A new type of hallucinogen, Alvin explained, his voice tinged with excitement. But not just any run-of-the-mill psychedelic. This one could potentially allow the user to experience alternate realities. Alternate realities? Raiden raised an eyebrow skeptically. You mean like parallel universes? Alvin nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Imagine being able to glimpse other versions of yourself, other paths your life could have taken. The implications for psychology, for understanding the nature of consciousness itself, are staggering. Raiden stood up and wandered over to the workbench, peering at the array of chemicals and equipment. Sounds wild, but also kind of dangerous, don't you think? There are always risks with experimental compounds, Alvin admitted. But I've run extensive simulations and animal trials. The effects should be temporary and relatively safe. Should be. Raiden chuckled. Not exactly reassuring, dude. Alvin carefully poured the purple liquid into a small glass vial and held it up to the light. Well, there's only one way to know for sure. Raiden's eyes widened. Wait, you're not thinking of testing it on yourself, are you? Alvin hesitated, then shook his head. No, I need to be clear-headed to monitor the effects and take notes. He turned to Raiden with a mischievous glint in his eye. But I was hoping my dear roommate might volunteer as a test subject. Raiden took a step back, holding up his hands. Whoa, hold on. You want me to be your guinea pig? Come on, Ray. Where's your sense of adventure? Alvin grinned. Don't you want to be part of groundbreaking scientific research? Raiden wavered, torn between curiosity and caution. I don't know, man. What if something goes wrong? I'll be right here monitoring you the whole time, Alvin assured him. And I have counteragents prepared in case we need to abort the experiment. It'll be perfectly safe. Raiden ran a hand through his hair, still uncertain. How long would the effects last? Based on my calculations, no more than a few hours, Alvin replied. You'll be back to normal before you know it. Raiden paced back and forth, weighing the pros and cons. Finally, he turned to Alvin with a resigned sigh. All right, fine, I'll do it. But if I end up growing an extra head or something, I'm blaming you. Alvin clapped him on the shoulder. That's the spirit. Let's make history. They cleared off the coffee table, and Raiden settled onto the couch. Alvin handed him the vial of purple liquid, which seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the dim light of their apartment. Bottoms up, Raiden said with a nervous laugh. He took a deep breath and downed the contents in one gulp. For a few moments, nothing happened. Raiden looked at Alvin quizzically. Is it supposed to taste like grape cough syrup? Suddenly, the room began to spin. Colors blurred and melted together like a kaleidoscope. Raiden gripped the edge of the couch, his knuckles turning white. Whoa, he gasped. I think it's kicking in. Alvin leaned forward eagerly, notepad in hand. What are you experiencing? But Raiden couldn't answer. The world around him was dissolving, reality slipping away like sand through an hourglass. He felt himself falling, tumbling through an endless void of swirling colors and fractured images. Then, abruptly, everything went black. When Raiden opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating floral wallpaper and antique furniture. He blinked in confusion, trying to orient himself. As he sat up, he caught sight of his reflection in a nearby mirror and gasped. Staring back at him was the face of a young woman with auburn hair and striking green eyes. He raised a hand to touch his cheek, and the woman in the mirror did the same. "What the hell?" he whispered, but the voice that came out was soft and feminine. A knock at the door made him jump. "Dana, honey, are you up? You don't want to be late for your first day at the lab." "Lab? Dana?" Raiden's mind reeled as he tried to make sense of what was happening. This had to be some kind of hallucination from Alvin's drug, but it felt so real, so vivid. "I'll be right down, Mom!" he called out, surprised at how naturally the words came. He, or rather she, got out of bed and looked around the room. A calendar on the wall caught her eye. May 1953. Somehow, impossibly, Raiden had been transported not just into another body, but into another time entirely. As Dana, Raiden fumbled through drawers and closets, trying to find appropriate clothes for a young woman in the 1950s. She settled on a simple blue dress and low heels, feeling awkward and out of place in the unfamiliar attire. Downstairs, Dana's mother fussed over her at the breakfast table. "Now remember, dear, this is a wonderful opportunity. Not many women get the chance to work in a real scientific laboratory. Make sure you mind your manners and do whatever the men tell you." Raiden nodded absently, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. He was living someone else's life, experiencing their memories and relationships as if they were his own. It was disorienting, to say the least. The drive to the lab was a surreal experience. Vintage cars cruised down tree-lined streets, while men in fedoras and women in pillbox hats strolled along the sidewalks. It was like being dropped into the middle of an old movie. At the lab, Dana was greeted by a stern-looking man in a white coat. "Ah, Miss Thompson, welcome to Hawthorne Research Facility. I'm Dr. Reeves, the lead scientist on this project. Follow me, please." As they walked through the pristine corridors, Dr. Reeves explained the nature of their work. "We're on the cutting edge of radioisotope research here. The applications for medicine, energy production, even national defense are limitless. Your job will be to assist with data collection and sample preparation." Raiden listened intently, trying to piece together what exactly Dana had gotten herself involved in. Something about the way Dr. Reeves spoke set off alarm bells in his mind. They entered a large laboratory filled with intimidating equipment. Men in lab coats bustled about, barely sparing Dana a glance. Dr. Reeves led her to a workstation in the corner. "You'll start here," he said, gesturing to a series of beakers and test tubes. "These samples need to be prepared for analysis. Be careful. They're highly radioactive." Raiden's eyes widened in alarm. Radioactive samples? With no protective gear in sight? This couldn't be safe. As Dana worked, Raiden's mind raced. He knew enough about the history of science to recognize the dangers of this kind of experimentation. These people had no idea of the long-term effects of radiation exposure. They were playing with fire, and Dana was right in the middle of it. Throughout the day, Raiden observed the casual disregard for safety protocols. Scientists handled radioactive materials with bare hands, smoke filled the air from unventilated experiments, and mysterious chemicals were disposed of down ordinary drains. By the end of the shift, Raiden was convinced that Dana was in serious danger. But how could he warn her? How could he change the course of events in a time and place that wasn't his own? As Dana left the lab that evening, Raiden felt a strange pulling sensation. The world began to blur and shift around him, colors swirling into a dizzying vortex. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for whatever came next. When he opened them again, he was back on the couch in his and Alvin's apartment. His roommate was leaning over him, a concerned expression on his face. "Ray, can you hear me? Are you all right?" Raiden sat up slowly, his head pounding. "Alvin, what happened?" "You've been out for hours," Alvin explained, scribbling furiously in his notebook. "I was starting to get worried. What did you experience?" Raiden recounted his vivid hallucination, describing Dana and the dangerous experiments at the lab in detail. Alvin listened with rapt attention, his eyes growing wider with each passing moment. "Fascinating," he muttered. "It seems the compound allowed you to inhabit the consciousness of someone in the past. The level of detail is remarkable. But why that particular person and time, I wonder?" Raiden shook his head, still trying to process everything he'd seen and felt. "I don't know, but it felt so real. And, Alvin, I think Dana's in danger. The work they're doing at that lab, it's not safe. She could be exposed to lethal levels of radiation." Alvin's brow furrowed. "It was just a hallucination, Ray. Dana isn't real." "But what if she is?" Raiden argued. "What if this drug somehow allows us to connect with actual people from the past? We have to warn her." Alvin hesitated, clearly skeptical. "Even if that were possible, and I'm not saying it is, how would we do that? You can't exactly send a letter back in time." Raiden stood up, pacing the room as he tried to think. Maybe I could go back, take the drug again and try to return to Dana's body. I could leave her a message, try to convince her to quit the job at the lab." "That's insane," Alvin protested. "We have no idea if you'd even end up in the same place again. And the risks of repeated exposure to an untested compound are nothing compared to what Dana's facing every day in that lab," Raiden interrupted. "We have to try, Alvin. I can't just sit here knowing what might happen to her." Alvin ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. "I don't like this, Ray, but I can see you're determined." He sighed heavily. "All right, we'll try one more dose, but this is it, okay? No more after this." Raiden nodded eagerly. "Thank you, I promise. Just one more time." As Alvin prepared another vial of the purple liquid, Raiden tried to focus his thoughts on Dana and the lab. He pictured her face, the feel of her body, the sights and sounds of 1953. If there was any chance of returning to that specific time and place, he had to concentrate with all his might. "Ready?" Alvin asked, holding out the vial. Raiden took a deep breath and nodded. "Here goes nothing," he said, and drank the contents in one swift gulp. The world began to spin once more, colors blending and reality fragmenting around him. Raiden closed his eyes and silently pleaded, "Take me back to Dana. Let me save her." When the dizziness subsided, Raiden opened his eyes to find himself once again in Dana's bedroom. Relief washed over him. It had worked. He was back in 1953, back in Dana's body. Glancing at the calendar, he realized only a day had passed since his last visit. There was still time to prevent Dana from continuing her dangerous work at the lab. Raiden, as Dana, hurried to her desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. In Dana's neat handwriting, he began to compose a letter to herself. "Dear Dana, this may sound crazy, but please believe me. Your life is in danger. The work you're doing at Hawthorne Research Facility is exposing you to dangerous levels of radiation. The effects may not be immediate, but they will catch up with you. You must quit this job immediately for your own safety and future. I know this is hard to accept, but I have seen what will happen if you continue down this path. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong or unsafe at the lab, it probably is. Don't let anyone pressure you into ignoring your concerns. Your life and health are more important than any job or scientific breakthrough. Please take this warning seriously. Find another path, one that doesn't put you at risk. Stay safe. A friend who cares about your future." Raiden folded the letter and tucked it into the novel on Dana's nightstand, hoping she would find it soon. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do to try and change her fate. As he finished hiding the letter, that familiar pulling sensation returned. The room began to blur, and Raiden knew his time in Dana's body was coming to an end. He silently wished her well, hoping against hope that his warning would be enough to alter the course of her life. The world spun, and darkness enveloped him once more. But when Raiden opened his eyes, he wasn't back in his apartment with Alvin. Instead, he found himself on a busy city street, horns honking and people hurrying past. Confused, he looked down at himself and gasped. He was still in Dana's body. Panic set in as Raiden tried to make sense of his surroundings. This wasn't 1953 anymore. The cars and clothing styles looked more modern. But it wasn't his own time either. Where, or rather, when, was he? A newspaper stand caught his eye, and he rushed over to check the date. September 15th, 1972. Somehow, he had jumped forward in Dana's timeline, nearly 2 decades from where he'd left her. As Raiden stood there, frozen in shock, a car came screeching around the corner. The driver, distracted by something in the passenger seat, didn't see Dana standing in the street. Time seemed to slow down. Raiden saw the car approaching, knew he should move, but his body wouldn't respond. In that moment of paralysis, he felt a strange shift, as if Dana's consciousness, dormant until now, suddenly surged forward. In a flash, Raiden found himself back in his own body, on the couch in his and Alvin's apartment. But the relief was short-lived as he realized what had just happened. Dana, panicked by the oncoming car and the strange memories and sensations flooding her mind, had somehow switched places with him at the last second. Which meant, "No!" Raiden cried out, sitting bolt upright. "Alvin, we have to go back. Dana's in danger?" Alvin, who had been monitoring Raiden's vital signs, looked up in confusion. "What are you talking about? You just got back!" Raiden grabbed Alvin by the shoulders, his eyes wild with urgency. "You don't understand. Dana and I switched places. She's in my body, in 1972, about to be hit by a car. We have to save her!" Alvin's face paled as he grasped the implications. "Oh, God. Okay, let me prepare another dose. We'll send you back right away." But before Alvin could even stand up, Raiden felt a searing pain rip through his body. He screamed, clutching his chest as waves of agony washed over him. "Ray, what's happening?" Alvin cried, rushing to his friend's side. Raiden could barely speak through the pain. "The car! It hit her! I can feel it!" He looked up at Alvin, tears streaming down his face. "We're too late." As the pain intensified, Raiden's vision began to fade. He could hear Alvin calling his name, feel his friend's hands shaking him, but it all seemed distant and muffled. With his last conscious thought, Raiden silently apologized to Dana for failing to save her. Then darkness claimed him, and he knew no more. Alvin watched in horror as Raiden's body went limp, his breathing shallow and erratic. He called for an ambulance, but deep down he knew it was futile. Whatever had happened to Dana in that other time and place had affected Raiden here and now. By the time the paramedics arrived, Raiden was gone. In the days and weeks that followed, Alvin was consumed by grief and guilt. He had created the compound that led to this tragedy, encouraged Raiden to take it not once, but twice. The weight of responsibility crushed him. But as the initial shock began to wear off, Alvin's scientific curiosity reasserted itself. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, more to understand about what had really happened to Raiden and Dana. Driven by a need for answers and a desire to make sense of his friend's death, Alvin threw himself into research. He scoured historical records, newspaper archives, and genealogical databases, searching for any trace of Dana Thompson. It took months of digging, but finally Alvin found what he was looking for. A small article in a Montreal newspaper from September 1972 reported a hit-and-run accident involving a young woman named Dana Thompson. She had been struck by a car and rushed to the hospital with severe injuries. Alvin's heart raced as he read the article, expecting to find Dana's obituary next. But to his astonishment, there was no record of her death. In fact, as he dug deeper, he found evidence that Dana had not only survived the accident, but gone on to live a long and remarkable life. According to the records, Dana had made a miraculous recovery from her injuries. She went on to become a pioneering researcher in the field of radiation safety, developing new protocols and technologies that saved countless lives. She married, had children, and lived well into her 90s, passing away peacefully in her sleep just a few years ago. As Alvin pieced together the story of Dana's life, he began to understand the true nature of what had happened. Somehow, impossibly, Raiden's consciousness had remained within Dana after the accident. His friend had lived on, inhabiting Dana's body, using his knowledge of the future and his own experiences to shape a new destiny. The realization brought both comfort and a profound sense of loss to Alvin. Raiden was gone, yes, but in a way, he had also lived an entire second life, one full of purpose and meaning. He had saved Donna, after all, not just from the dangers of the lab, but from the accident that should have claimed her life. Alvin sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the implications of his discovery. The compound he had created had done far more than allow someone to glimpse alternate realities. It had somehow facilitated the transfer of consciousness across time and space. The potential applications were staggering, but so were the risks. Alvin thought of Raiden, of the sacrifice he had made, and knew that this knowledge came at too high a price. With a heavy heart, Alvin gathered up all his notes and research materials on the compound. He couldn't risk this happening to anyone else. The world wasn't ready for this kind of power. As he fed the papers into a shredder, Alvin made a silent promise to his lost friend. He would honor Raiden's memory by living a life of purpose, by using his scientific knowledge to help others in safer, more conventional ways. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.